This is a presentation on the performance of a full-scale MBBR system for biological removal of complex nitrogen compounds. The nitrogen compounds were coming from a cyanide detoxification effluent at a gold mine in northern Canada. I'm Marc Laliberté. I'll be presenting the project and the context, and Caroline Dale later on will be presenting a bit of theory on MBBR and the results on for the full-scale process. Timeline, very briefly, the mine site is called Eleanor. It's in northern Quebec, as shown in the map there. It's fairly high up in latitude. Gold was discovered at the Eleanor mine site back in 2003. The project underwent a number of studies and impact studies and so on. Construction was started and first gold was poured in 2014. The plant started full production in 2015, and as soon as the full production started, the effluent started having issues with toxicity. As we'll see later, toxicity is one of the criteria that must be met in the effluent. It wasn't immediately obvious what were the cause of the toxicity. We had to do studies to identify the toxicity causes. Biological treatment was identified in 2016 as a solution. That was confirmed by piloting and everything. Construction was started, and in 2017 the new treatment plant was commissioned. And since late 2017, after commissioning was completed, the effluent discharge has been fully compliant with local regulation. The results we'll show later on will present the results from 2017 to the middle of 2020, at the time at which we are recording this video. At a glance, basically, the mine is extracting gold using a sodium cyanide solution. The cyanide compounds are discharged to tailings. This is mostly cyanate coming from a cyanide detoxification process and thiocyanate. This led to an increase of cyanide compounds, not free cyanide as such, but cyanide compounds in the tailings, and the excess water that is being discharged contained increasing amount of cyanide compounds, hence creating some toxicity in the effluent. Regulation Canada, we have both federal and provincial regulations. They are, in this case, fairly similar. So for the purpose of this presentation, they can be considered to be essentially the same. So basically, we need to maintain pH within around the neutral point. TSS must be less than 15 on average, 15 milligram per liter. Various metals must be removed, including arsenic, copper, iron, lead, nickel, and zinc. And the effluent must be not acutely toxic. Two different species are required to be used in the test. One is the rainbow trout, the other one is the greater Daphnia. It is kind of interesting that the two species are not sensitive to the main contaminants. As an example, rainbow trout is much more sensitive to ammonia than the greater Daphnia, but on the other end, the greater Daphnia is much more sensitive to cyanate than the rainbow trout is. Ammonia toxicity is well known. It's something that has been known for years. It is based on undissociated ammonia, which depend on temperature and pH. The impact of cyanate on toxicity is not something that has been as well described, but in this case was found to be significant. What caused the toxicity in this case, as I said earlier, is a combination of the free ammonia, the free cyanides. There were actually very little free cyanide in the water, usually less than 1 milligram per liter, sometimes a fraction of that. Weak acid dissociated cyanides. This could be at time be more important concentration, but was found not to be the major source of toxicity. Cyanate and thiocyanate. All of those components are biodegradable. They're all meaning that bacteria will oxidize or hydrolyze those components to form products that that release energy. They use that energy for their own metabolism. The equations are below on this slide. Basically, at the end of the day, all those reactions from cyanide, from thiocyanate, and from cyanate produce at some point in time ammonia nitrogen. This has two impacts. The first impact is that ammonia nitrogen, as we said earlier, is toxic by itself, so need to be taken into account when estimating how much ammonia nitrogen is going to be released in the environment. And also the other impact is that it increased the load of ammonia nitrogen that need to be treated. So this has an impact on the design, the physical design, how big a reactor must we have to treat the ammonia nitrogen. In this specific case, the contribution of the cyanide compound was roughly the same as the contribution of the free ammonia coming in the effluent. So basically, without taking this into account, we would have significantly undersized the reactor at the plant. It was not immediately obvious when we were in the early phase of the project what was causing the toxicity of the water at Eleanor mine. There was an existing treatment plant. The treatment plant was removing metals. In this case, it was mostly copper and arsenic that were the two main metals present, and then they were removed at level way below the toxicity limits. We started to suspect that ammonia was an issue. We tested at a lab scale biological process to remove the ammonia. We found that actually, yes, ammonia was a constituent of the toxicity. We found, however, that even when removing completely the ammonia, there was still some toxicity, mostly for Daphnia mania, the greater Daphnia. And we found that actually we needed to design the treatment system to remove both components to be able to remove that toxicity. There were tests done using stuff like zeolites to remove only the ammonia. Work actually fairly well, but because zeolites do not remove cyanate, at the end of the day we could not use that to actually make the effluent non-toxic. On-site demonstration was undertaken, was about 6 months, starting late fall, going into early spring. So we went through winter season. We wanted to demonstrate that the process actually worked with variation in the water temperature, water composition as it is in real life. We demonstrated that we could actually treat the water at low temperatures. We had a couple issues as shown below. This is a day where for some reason a detergent was added into the water, and then suddenly all kind of foam formed on the reactors. That actually stopped the biological process, but it was kind of interesting because we found that once the detergent had been flushed out of the system went back to full capacity within a couple days. And so we managed to demonstrate that once the media is seeded with biomass, the system is fairly robust and able to restart after unexpected upsets. That was actually pretty comforting for the client because he knew then that if stuff happened, they could restart fairly easily. The process at Eleanor that we implemented is a fairly simple process. As I said earlier, we already had a treatment system to remove metals. So it's high pH metal precipitation on the left side, which is mostly in this case copper, but would be also zinc and nickel. There's actually very little zinc and nickel in the effluent. It's mostly copper. And on the right side, there is a neutral pH metal removal, which in this case is mostly arsenic. The ore at the side does contain a fairly significant amount of arsenic, so it's something that actually need to be removed. We added provision to heat the water if required. That's both to increase the capacity of the system if it is required, and also to prevent freezing in winter, because this operates 12 months per year. So we install a boiler and heat recovery using heat exchangers. And then we went with the two-stage MBBR. The first stage MBBR being to remove the cyanide and thiocyanate, and the second stage MBBR is to remove the nitrification, to remove the ammonia.
The MBBR process is a well-established biological process developed in the 80s in Norway. The bacteria develop on a polyethylene carrier, which provides a large protected surface area. Each meter cube of carrier has a surface area of 800 square meters. You can see on the top right-hand photo a carrier of Anox K5 media with biomass. Typically, biomass only develops on the inner surface of the media as the media moves within the reactor, creating continuous shocks, and therefore biomass never really develops on the outside surface of the media. The carriers have a density close to that of water that can easily mix within the reactor. Under aerobic condition, we use the aeration system provided for the biology, whilst under anoxic conditions, mechanical mixers are used. You can see both an aerobic reactor and an anoxic reactor in the photos on the right-hand side. The continuous motion of the carrier allows excess biomass to be broken off the media, thereby preventing excess biomass to develop and clog the media, which would reduce oxygen transfer and nutrient transfer into the biofilm, reducing performance. Using fixed film technology allows specific bacteria to develop in each reactors. For example, we have nitrifying biomass in aerobic reactors and denitrification in anoxic reactors, and each biomass can operate under its optimal conditions. You can see the two-stage system that was implemented at Eleanor on the top right-hand photo, and the plant was installed right next door to the existing preliminary treatment for metals removal, as shown on the CAD drawing. The first stage reactor is designed for cyanide compound removal, which can inhibit nitrification, whilst the second reactor converts the ammonia produced from the first stage reactor and present in the effluent into nitrate. At present, there is no limit on nitrate in Canada, and therefore there is no denitrification stage installed. This can be added as a future expansion if required. You can see some more photographs. The right-hand tank in the left-hand side photograph is the cyanide reactor. It is designed for a flow rate of 26,000 meter cube per day and a nitrogen load of 462 kilogram nitrogen per day. The cyanide removal stage is 530 cubic meters, which represents a hydraulic retention time of approximately 1 hour, whilst the nitrification stage on the left-hand side has a volume of 1,250 cubic meters, which corresponds to approximately 2 hours retention time. There is an integrated automatic sampling station for process control with online instruments such as DO, pH, and turbidity. And there is also a multi-parameter analyzer for COD, ammonia, nitrate, and phosphorus measurement, which allow process monitoring. Of course, manual samples are also taken and analyzed in a laboratory. The blowers are situated in a building for additional weather protection. Now to the operating results since commissioning. During the commissioning phase, starting in July 2017, we controlled the load to the plant by regulating the flow rate to progressively build up treatment capacity within the system. Although we did frequently have to operate on a batch basis to let nitrite oxidize to nitrate to avoid nitrite buildup in the system. Once sufficient treatment capacity was achieved, the full flow was sent to the MBBR, which then experienced the natural load variation linked to the seasonal changes, for example, the spring snow melts, and the changes in mine activity. You can see the variation in ammonia loads presented on the graph, and you can see the first low load during July, steadily increasing by October, November. The average total nitrogen load being treated is around 200 kilograms of nitrogen per day, with peak loading of 500 kilograms per day, and this leaves sufficient capacity in the system to allow for the mine future expansion. In terms of temperature, the plant was designed for a minimum operating temperature of 8 degrees Celsius. A heating system was installed and was used during the first winter to ensure stable operation. It was also used to increase the temperature by a couple of degrees to boost the nitrification rate during peak loads. During the second winter, the client wished to reduce the operating cost and gradually reduce the heating of the influent, allowing the plant to eventually run without heating while still producing a compliant effluent down to 5 degrees Celsius. And we can see the seasonal variations on the graph presented. To comply with local regulations, regular samples are sent to external laboratories for toxicity testing to rainbow trout and Daphnia magna. The test is carried out on a series of effluent dilutions, for example, using 25% of effluent in the sample, 50% of effluent in the sample, or completely undiluted effluent, 100% of sample. The effluent is deemed non-toxic if there is less than 50% mortality of the test organism using undiluted effluent, i.e. you have to put 100% of the effluent and achieve less than 50% deaths. The graph shown here, shown for rainbow trout, shows that the dilution required to achieve less than 50% mortality in rainbow trout prior to the commissioning of the plant in August 2017 was between 25 and 78%. Once the MBBRs were online and fully seeded, all the sample came back non-toxic and compliant with the discharge permit. Daphnia magna is more sensitive to cyanide. The cyanide removal did take a little bit longer to develop compared to ammonia removal. Hence, a couple of the samples following commissioning did come back toxic, but within a couple of weeks, everything was compliant and has been ever since, meeting the client's objectives. The Eleanor Mine biological treatment plant is a success story. The introduction of a novel treatment process to rectify ammonia and cyanide byproduct discharge from the mine contributed to the award of the Global Excellence Award for Sustainability Stewardship in 2019. The MBBR process delivers robust and reliable treatment for effluent from cyanide detoxification plant. The effluent is consistently non-toxic for both rainbow trout and Daphnia, as required by the Canadian regulations. It can, of course, be applied to other geographies, Peru, Ghana, anywhere where gold mining occurs. Of course, it's not limited to gold mining. Ammonia and nitrates are present in a lot of mine activities. Heating is not strictly required for biological process. Conversion of cyanide compounds and nitrification have been demonstrated at temperatures as low as 5 degrees. However, heating in northern regions is strongly recommended for frost protection. It can also be used to rapidly handle peak loads. To conclude, biological treatment of cyanide detoxification plant provides a sustainable long-term solution for gold mines. We would be happy to assist any mine operators with any effluent treatment, so you can feel free to contact Mark or myself with any questions you may have regarding the presentation or any other biological treatment options. Mark and I would like to thank the management and operations staff at Eleanor Mine for sharing their data and allowing this publication to take place and sharing the return of experience to a wide audience. Thank you very much for your attention. So here are our email addresses: marc.laliberte@veolia.com, caroline.dale@veolia.com. Some questions for CE credits. True or false? Heating is required to maintain bacterial activity in the winter period. False. Biological treatment has been demonstrated to be successful down to 5 degrees Celsius, which allows the mine to send effluent without heating. Heating is, however, recommended for frost protection. True or false? Without specific treatment, cyanide compounds accumulate in the tailings and results in toxicity to the receiving environment. And that is, of course, true. Since tailing water is recycled to the concentrator, cyanide compounds concentration steadily increases during the lifetime of the mine unless specific treatment is applied.
Hello all, this is a presentation on the performance of a full-scale MBBR system for biological removal of complex nitrogen compounds. The nitrogen compounds were coming from a cyanide detoxification effluent at a gold mine in northern Canada. I'm Marc Laliberte. I'll be presenting the project and the context, and Caroline Dale later on will be presenting a bit of theory on MBBR and the results on the for the full-scale process. Timeline. Very briefly, the mine site is called Eleanor. It's in northern Quebec, as shown in the map there. It's fairly high up in latitude. Gold was discovered at the Eleanor mine site back in 2003. The project underwent a number of studies and impact studies and so on. Construction was started and the first gold was poured in 2014. The plant started full production in 2015, and as soon as the full production started, the effluent started having issues with toxicity. As we'll see later, toxicity is one of the criteria that must be met in the effluent. It wasn't immediately obvious what were the cause of the toxicity. We had to do studies to identify the toxicity causes. Biological treatment was identified in 2016 as a solution. That was confirmed by piloting and everything. Construction was started, and in 2017 the new treatment plant was commissioned. And since late 2017, after commissioning was completed, the effluent discharge has been fully compliant with local regulation. The results we'll show later on will present the results from 2017 to the middle of 2020, at the time at which we are recording this video. At a glance, basically, the mine is extracting gold using a sodium cyanide solution. The cyanide compounds are discharged to tailings. This is mostly cyanate coming from a cyanide detoxification process and thiocyanate. This led to an increase of cyanide compounds, not free cyanide as such, but cyanide compounds in the tailings, and the excess water that is being discharged contained increasing amount of cyanide compounds, and creating some toxicity in the effluent. Regulation Canada, we have both federal and provincial regulations. They are in this case fairly similar. So for